Bobby Lopez, and tonight is Mass Resistance Hour. Tonight is the hour when I have a series of directors and principals and top kahunas or big kahunas or whatever from Mass Resistance who are joining me. I have Kevin Witt, who is the Assistant Director for Mass Resistance Texas. And we have Arthur Shaper, who's the Organization Director for the entire organization. He's here as well. And Tracy Shannon's going to be joining us shortly. She's the Director for Mass Resistance Texas. Now, I have gathered all these people here today on a night which kind of brings together different sides of my brain. I used to actually be the Director of Mass Resistance Texas. I think Tracy Shannon does a much better job than I did. But this was a big part of my life. I was part of Mass Resistance for a number of years. But at the same time, I also have been involved with Gatekeepers Online. Those are the people who are running this studio that I use for the Big Brown Gadfly, and that I'm a big part of their group. And we recently published this book called Church and State: How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America. You should get it. You can get it at the gatekeepersonline.com store. And I have a whole chapter when I talked about the problem at the seminaries. I talked about the problem that we saw in higher education and the fact that there were people like Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk who we have come to view as heroes, and we've come to be dependent on them because of the fact that right now we're in the fight of our lives with this election. We're trying to fight against election fraud, and sometimes these conservative celebrities are people that we feel like we really need to be loyal to. But then we find ourselves in quite a bit of a mess and that's what we have found right now. And specifically, I want to focus on Charlie Kirk, who is someone who has been very close to the president. He was appointed by the president on the 1776 Commission for Patriotic Education. He was given an honorary doctorate from Liberty University, which was a school that was very popular with President Trump. He was also one of the co-founders of the Falkirk Center at Liberty University. So he's been out there very vocally defending the president as we're fighting election fraud. But then he also has a lot of these side engagements that cause social conservatives, such as the people who are in mass resistance, pause. We have to step back and ask, what the heck is going on, and what do we do about this? How do we stay true to the fight against election fraud and against many of the fights that against the left that we have to fight, and we need sometimes Trump camps to support us, while at the same time maintaining the importance of our social values. So first, I'm going to go to Arthur Shaper, who is, I'm sorry that I mispronounced his name. His name is Arthur Shaper. Arthur, can you tell me, first of all, what are the core social values that you would say mass resistance sees as deal breakers? What are the things that, what are the values that you think mass resistance sees as the absolute minimum that we cannot sacrifice and we can't compromise on?
Right. Thank you so much, Bobby, for having me on. Above all, we really have to take a firm stance against the LGBT agenda in all of its forms. It's very classy for like the Heritage Foundation and some of these other conservative Inc., fundraising mill organizations. It's very easy to go after transgenderism. It's so evidently perverse, a man trying to be a woman or a woman trying to be a man. But the whole alphabet of perversions has to be opposed. That means we oppose the redefinition of marriage. It's one man and one woman. We oppose gay adoptions. We oppose the normalization of homosexuality, not just in the public schools, but in the public square. And linking this issue with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, there's this growing encroachment to normalize so-called gay or homosexual conservatives. This is not conserving anything. We have to conserve the culture, and you have to do that by conserving the family, natural marriage, life and family. Those are indispensable conditions. This should not just be an expectation from mass resistance, but from every conservative, from every constitutionalist, from every patriot in the country. We shouldn't be tolerating anything less than a restoration of natural marriage, life, and family.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. It's a very powerful statement. And I know that this is something that's on the mind of a lot of conservatives. because I'll just give you my experience with it. When I'm out in the trenches fighting for a lot of these religious liberty and social conservative values, you come across people who say, yeah, I'm gay, I'm in a relationship, I don't want them to teach this in the schools, I'm not on the part of transgender surgery, and we're left with this difficult situation. Sometimes we bargain with it, sometimes we don't, sometimes we draw a line. I think Kevin can really give us a lot of enlightenment here, because Kevin has information about what happened at the Turning Point USA event that took place in Florida, which was one of the things that prompted a lot of the immediate concern. Given the fact that Arthur just laid out what the do or die positions on social conservatism are for mass resistance, and I assume that you support most of those positions. Is that fair, Kevin? You're basically in line with what Arthur said?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So what happened at the event that Charlie Kirk organized in Florida, and why does this present a difficulty for the constituency that mass resistance represents?
Well, I want to start out by saying that a lot of people will come to Charlie Kirk's defense and say that he's a great Christian man and things like this. And I've never met Charlie Kirk, so I cannot say whether that's true or not. Hopefully he is a good Christian man. However, at his event that he just recently had in Florida, they had a drag queen, Lady Maga, who was performing in drag in front of a bunch of high school students.
Now, just to clarify, Kevin, from what I understand, this wasn't just a question of Lady Maga coming and being part of the audience, or maybe even just giving a speech. She actually performed an adult-themed entertainment program in front of high school students, and it was somewhat sexual in nature. Was that fair to say?
Yes, and he was dressed very promiscuous, like most drag queens do. And then he was on stage performing to, I guess, a song that he wrote or somebody wrote. I'm not sure who it was, but it was about Trump and MAGA and all this stuff. And what my problem is with this is that many of these same conservatives will go and they will stand up against Drag Queen Story Hour and say, this is not okay. Drag Queen Story Hour is not okay to be taking place in public schools, and these drag queens coming in performing for people in the third that are 3 years old or 4 or 5, 8, whatever, minors, kids. They will agree that that's not okay, but then they will stand up and clap whenever a drag queen comes to a conservative event and performs for conservatives that are high school students. That's not okay. And then on top of this, they had the Bang Energy girls who were dressed like a bunch of strippers shooting money out of a cannon to the audience.
Right. Well, I mean, just
high school students.
Right. Yeah. From the way I would summarize it with the Bang Energy girls, and I was corrected by Jeff Dornick that these were part of a vendor or whatever that was an advertiser that bought time on stage. And so there are some who argue that they're not part of the program, but at any rate, they were all in the show, and the girls were dressed, and they were dressed in exercise outfits, but it didn't. They had their midriff showing. They were very, very tight. The girls were good-looking girls, but they were dressed very provocatively. And the whole thing about shooting the money in the cannon just gave the whole thing a feeling of like we were at Hooters. And that's immediately what a lot of the anti-Trump conservatives, the never Trumpers, had jumped on immediately. Rod Dreher, like within hours, he had a headline basically saying that the Trump movement has gone Hooters thanks to Charlie Kirk. So we're in that tough situation. There were a lot of rainbow flags around. Kevin, I know that you've talked to some of the people who were there on the ground. What other information do you have about what it felt like as the event was unfolding? What else could you say about it?
Well, a lot of them said that it was a great event, but that whenever those two events happened, whenever they had the drag queen performing and the Bang Energy girls, that it felt awkward. It felt like, what is happening? Like cringeworthy. And this is like, I'm a activist. This is what I do. I go across the country. I've been to DC already 4 times within the last couple of months, and I'm going back. But what I've seen going to all of these events, these Trump events, is compromise. And a lot of these people consider themselves to be Christians or say that they're Christians and conservatives. However, they compromise their faith because there are so many of these openly gay activists that are leading the charge in the Trump movement and the MAGA movement. And it's like, when are we going to get to where we no longer will compromise? Charlie Kirk, if you're a Christian man, why are you compromising your faith?
Well, I guess the question that I would have, Kevin, because I think it's fair for me to reveal that you have some experience in the lifestyle, right? I mean, that you came out of, you were a drag queen, you were involved in the transgender community for a very long time. I know that that's a lot of where you come from, is you want to help other people get out of that. Do you feel that Charlie Kirk and this whole MAGA incorporated culture that surrounds him, do they have a place for you? Because what I always hear from people is, we need a big tent. If we want to have freedom of speech for some, we should have freedom of speech for all. But my concern is, every time Charlie Kirk comes on stage and he brings his gay friend Rob Smith, does he ever do that for somebody like you? Does he have a place for somebody who comes out there and says, people aren't born gay, people aren't born trans, you can come out of this with the love of Jesus Christ? Do you feel like you're welcome in that environment?
Well, of course not, because I would go against their whole narrative. And so now I will tell you that I have met Lady MAGA. I have talked to her, hung out with her, and I've hung out with Mario Presents. I've spoken with him, hung out with him. Now, and so I am not here to say that I hate or dislike any of these people. However, I am here to say that I do not condone or agree with their lifestyle, nor do I condone or agree with drag, especially drag that's taking place in front of children or minors. So yes, so I will say I like them as people. I love them. I actually love the LGBT community. I do what I do because I want to see them come out of that lifestyle of perversion, because I know what it's like. I've been there. I lived it for over 20 years, and it's nothing. It's not life-giving. It is perversion and corruption. And most of these people have been molested, neglected. Most of them are drug addicts or alcoholics. So,
well, and that's my thing is, I feel as though Charlie Kirk and this culture of Turning Point USA, because they have definitely made huge efforts to bring in the LGBT positive, conservative big tent personalities. I feel as though they don't seem to get how sensitive and how painful the abuse issues are. And that when you are doing this, you're touching upon a lot of people in the audience who did struggle with abuse and for whom this is a painful thing. I don't know if they have the sensitivity or the finesse to be able to deal with that. I do want to ask something of Arthur, and then I have to bring in Tracy Shannon, who just arrived. Welcome, Tracy. But I do want to ask Arthur some questions about what we're supposed to do with the conservative movement after 2020. Now, Arthur, I know that you used to write, for instance, for townhall.com. I used to see your articles there. And Town Hall, even some of the very vocal people like Kurt Schlichter, they really made a lot of overtures to want to bring Guy Benson, who's a gay conservative, in, and they wanted to be open at the same time that Dennis Prager was open to these groups of people. As somebody who was in the trenches, you were fighting on the immigration issue, you were fighting on the taxes issue and on the Constitution, you were part of it. Did you feel like the addition of these gay conservative voices eventually made it so you couldn't remain there? Or did you feel like you were welcome there with the gay voices side by side, saying, we disagree on some things, but we agree on the Constitution, so we're all part of the same movement? How did it go?
You're bringing up a really good point. I was able to, the last 2 articles that I was able to submit and they received was about Pete Buttigieg. and how there's just no way that someone like this, who's such an overt leftist, and then who wanted to pepper or sprinkle his perverse, anti-biblical, anti-constitutional views with biblical language, he would pervert and distort scriptures in an attempt to justify himself in his overtly sinful, destructive lifestyle. He was, quote unquote, married to a man. However, I can tell you that when I'd written articles going after Drag Queen Story Hour, when Michelle Malkin, she wrote an article about Tracy's work and Mass Resistance's work in general going after Drag Queen Story Hour, and how they exposed the hypocrisy of CPAC and the American Conservative Union shutting out Mass Resistance when they had paid the fees to have a booth at the 2018 CPAC conference and then revoked it at the last minute. That article was not allowed to be published. If the articles that I wrote were focusing specifically on freedom of speech or free speech issues or on people on the left, that was okay. But when I wrote articles that was getting closer towards criticizing the fact that LGBT is being normalized on the right and that shouldn't happen, they wouldn't publish those articles. They didn't want to do it. And after what I wrote after the articles I wrote about Pete Buttigieg, they haven't printed my stuff since. And
right. Wow. Okay. So where does this leave us after 2020, Arthur? Yeah, I know you and I are both veterans from the LA, even when we were fighting, for conservatism in LA. I believe you still actually live in California. I don't know why that is the case. You need to move very soon. All right. But the thing that I am struck with is we've just come to this election, which has mobilized conservatives on a scale that I've never seen before. I've never seen conservatives this awake. It makes me excited. I'm exhilarated. I am not afraid of a Joe Biden presidency if there's a conservative movement that has been awoken by the election fraud and that is going into a Joe Biden presidency saying, we don't respect this presidency. We know it's a fraud and we're going to be a strong voice and a strong movement together for it. But at the same time, I'm wondering, what do we do with all of these compromises that Trump as a person and as a president forced on us? Because he gathered, these were, in my mind, these were unforced errors. And I think Charlie Kirk is a very good example. Trump did not need to bring Charlie Kirk into anything. Trump had so much support on the issue of education. It's just Trump, he has been a disaster in the area of education. Betsy DeVos has not been able to move the dial on any of this. In fact, she retreated on a lot of the trans bathroom stuff, all of these things. Trump did not really protect the free speech for professors. Instead, he kind of followed Charlie Kirk's lead, which basically said, well, guest speakers have to be able to speak without getting kicked off, which is a convenient way to help his
step in. What I'd like to start pointing out is I think what has awakened, and it's been like a mixed blessing. You've seen some of those younger so-called Groyper types. That was the name they gave themselves, that started going to these college events. And they started calling out what they saw as hypocritical or anti-American first or America first principles. That to me, in a lot of ways, though, is it's problematic and ineffective, because in a lot of cases, it's just different cycles of grift. You've got Andrew Torba from Gab. He talked about there's conservative Inc. There's the establishment institutions that they publish their articles, they promote their conferences, they have their guest speakers, and they make their money. But you see now a new level of grift with the MAGA universe. And, you could include in that list even, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, for example, or Dan Bongino even, along with certainly Charlie Kirk. He sells a book, The MAGA Doctrine. You got even Newt Gingrich. It's more people selling books because there's a niche market which has emerged. And in the midst of all this, we have a massive amount of cultural decay in this country, which is not getting better. And having a bunch of guest speakers, And this is a big problem. It's the really contentious issues that people are up in arms about. And speaking specifically on these socially conservative issues, why is Charlie Kirk insisting on having an openly gay man who, about Rob Smith, by the way, I mean, not even 3 years ago, he was on CNN, okay, not Breitbart, not Washington Times. He was on CNN condemning the president for wisely deciding to ban confused men and women from serving in the military, trying to be the opposite sex. Okay, Rob Smith condemned that, and he continued to condemn that decision. And then how is this guy now suddenly being some big-time MAGA spokesman and getting on the Trump train or on the TPUSA train? I mean, it is grift on a massive scale, and it's not just selfish and insincere, it's destructive. And this hypocrisy really rankles younger people as it rankles a lot of conservatives like me. I mean, it's happening now.
This BF Broadcasting has just posted something. They posted a comment. He is a charlatan, and I assume they're talking there about Charlie Kirk. Would you go that far?
Okay, I think what happens is like there's a lot of fun and opportunity and going to colleges and speaking out against leftists, but it's it's pretty much easy fodder once you have a basic amount of knowledge. It's pretty easy to go after leftists. Most of them aren't even logical; they're just so emotional. You're not trying to change their minds. You're just appealing to a third-party audience, and a lot of these leftists look patently foolish. But at the same time, you've got Charlie Kirk, and I've seen some of the videos that in North Carolina. To me, that was a stunning example of very bad faith and very bad argumentation. Charlie Kirk practically demonized the guy for calling out.
What happened in North Carolina? Can you tell us what happened in North Carolina? I'm not familiar with.
So what happened? This was another one of the culture war forums, and so the Groypers showed up, and some of them. And I just want to be for the record, I find it odious. Their anti-Semitism is odious. Their anti-Israeli sentiment is odious. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we've got so many problems in our own country. It's understandable to want to have all monies to stay in the United States. So that's not an issue. But it's the racialism, it's the discrimination. Like they really do believe, if we had fewer Black, Hispanic, and Asian people in this country would be better off. And it's just nonsensical because skin color just doesn't dictate ideology. That's just science.
Okay, but you agree with Charlie Kirk on those things?
I absolutely do.
Yeah. Okay. So right.
There was one response he gave. I mean, this shows that I'm a measured person. I'm really focusing on an issue. I'm not, and that's it. That brings up another point. The Groypers just want to tear people down.
Right. Okay.
That's a waste of time.
Are you referring to in North Carolina when there was someone who came up and said?
Let me get to that. Let me explain that part. So
yeah, you can get to that. Yeah.
So the other guy said, "Okay, Charlie, you say that you're a Christian, but how come you're supporting gay marriage? It's a sin against God." And so Charlie Kirk, rather than debating this issue, he just launched into these personal attacks, and he started with, "Are you a Trump supporter? Are you a proud Trump supporter? Well, then if you don't support Donald Trump on this issue, you are not a Trump supporter." And then he riled up the crowd and everybody cheered. But honestly, the guy who was pressing him on this issue about normalizing homosexuality and how it's contrary to the Bible and contrary to Christian doctrine and contrary even to a sound moral public policy, his points were actually valid and deserved a response. And Charlie Kirk engaged in personal invective. It was pretty shallow. Then he engaged in other things too. He says, "Well, what do you want to do with all the gay people?" He would answer the question with another question, deflect, and then shame the guy. And on top of that, I think Benny Johnson on his Twitter feed shamed the guy with, "Look at this guy is an anti-gay extremist." Wait a second. A man espousing and defending Christian principles, biblical doctrine, and moral truth is an anti-gay extremist? Really?
Yeah, I think this is where it gets very difficult for us. I do want to respond. BF Broadcasting says, "I like Candace Owens, but her understanding of Islam is nil." Now, I do want to point out that I think Owen and Charlie Kirk are not totally the same because they had a split, but they're both part of the same, I would say, general trend of this celebrity culture where they're on the Trump train, but then we find that they're not helpful on these issues. I think Charlie Kirk is worse than not helpful because he's actively forcing it on people, and he does attack people who don't want to go along with it and don't support it. And he's made it so that that is part of what being a Trump supporter is defined as. It's defined as supporting these things. BF Broadcasting also says, maybe I went a little far on charlatan, but the fact remains he has problematic hypocrisy. I think that's what a lot of we're getting at here. Whether it's hypocrisy or just that he's too young to actually have a clear vision for what conservatism is. I think he's just a libertarian, and it was just a huge opportunity for him to be able to jump on the Trump train. I do want to have one last thought from Arthur, and then I want to talk to Tracy about her experience dealing with the Republicans in Texas, because she's been very involved in activism in Texas. And this Charlie Kirk style of conservatism obviously poses a lot of difficulties for some of these activists. Arthur, what was the comment you wanted to make?
So the last point I want to make is people need to be making more thorough researched arguments against homosexuality and for natural marriage, against gay adoption and for natural family, against transgenderism and in favor of the natural design of male and female. That is still conspicuously missing from social conservatives by and large. This is how mass resistance stands out. We're not making arguments based on religion, preference, or tradition. We make arguments based on science, sociology, research, statistics. When that argument starts to come forward in a stronger fashion, it will make it much, much harder for these conservative Inc., MAGA Inc., conservative influencer types to dodge the issue with personal invectives. And that's what we need to really step up on.
Yeah. Well, I thank you a lot for that, Arthur. Now, Tracy, I'm glad you've joined us. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. It's such a pleasure to have you on. Tracy made huge waves. Let me just give the audience a little bit of a window into this. Tracy was the one who exposed the fact that there were people who were involved in Drag Queen Story Hour who were registered sex offenders. And that went international. I was at a conference in Panama, and Tracy's work was there on the screen. But there's a dark side to that, Tracy, which is that many people took that work that you did. They did fundraising off of it. They ran all around the world. They got to give speeches on it. I never felt that you were given the credit that was due to you for that work. And then on top of it, I feel as though I don't see you being given the platform in Texas with the Republican Party that I would like to see. And so I'm going to ask you just a pointed question. Do you feel that this Charlie Kirk brand of conservatism forms a barrier when you go and you try to speak to lawmakers in Austin, when you try to go to some of these events? Do you feel that it's a barrier that people treat you as though you have less credibility because you really believe in this? It's not just something that you're trying to raise money off of. Because I know you, and I know that this is something that is very dear to your heart for very personal reasons, and you're not just someone who's on it. I mean, is this a barrier to you?
Yeah, and in some ways it is. There's this sentiment coming from leadership in the Republican Party here in Texas. I definitely want to exclude Alan West from this statement because it's not him I'm speaking about. I'm talking about, I think, the guy who was the former Southern Republican Executive Committee chair. Cannot think of his name right now, but Kevin and I went and we spoke against partnership with the Log Cabin Republicans. We weren't allowed to speak in the committee hearing. So I spoke to the chairman after, and he told me, and I've heard this, from the liberals as well. So to hear this coming from a Republican leadership in our party was very concerning. But he said, the times are changing, the party's changing, it's time to move on. The problem with that is that our party, the Republican Party, is the only party with a pro-family planks. It's the only party with pro-faith planks. So if we allow the grifters, and I'm saying these are the people, taking mass resistance work, the good work of grandmothers, mothers, fathers that we do, and we pass on the mass resistance organization to get it out there into the public eyes and inform them. Well, you have other people making money off that, making speeches. That does not go make your money, okay? As long as the work gets out there and the word gets out, I really don't care. I'm not making money off of this. It's not why I do it. But we need the pro-family planks. So are we going to have a drag queen and homosexual rock star who wears chaps with his butt exposed, and homosexual men? And
that's Ricky Rebel you're referring to, right?
Yeah, Ricky Rebel, and
right.
The MAGA, Lady MAGA, and these other characters, and then they had the girls who were kind of dressed, I would say, inappropriately, definitely not modestly, shooting out money into an audience. Arthur had written about that. This is not the direction to take the party. And that's what concerns me, because just because people are younger doesn't necessarily mean they don't have, aren't capable of having conservative values, all of the conservative values, including the pro-family and pro-faith planks.
Well, in my experience, when you bring all the socially liberal young people in, even if they are fiscally conservative, even if they hate socialism, which is the one thing that Charlie Kirk talks about constantly because he is so libertarian, the young people who are socially conservative, the very Catholic, very Christian, very evangelical, or even maybe not religious, but just very socially conservative young people don't necessarily feel comfortable. They don't feel welcome. It's a party atmosphere that sets in, and it starts to become they feel judged, or they feel vulnerable when they're around all these people who are pushing this on them. So it is not just a thing of bringing new other people in, and then it's a question of you push out the people who aren't comfortable with it. Did you have any interaction with Dan Crenshaw? Because he was somebody who disappointed me tremendously when he wrote a letter to the Republican Party saying, and I'm going to bring Kevin in on this as well. Kevin, didn't Dan Crenshaw say that it was important for people to give the log cabin Republicans not just membership, because obviously anybody can join the Republican Party, but they wanted to have a formal role. They wanted to have a seat on the executive council reserved just for gay people in the Republican Party of Texas, right? Did Dan Crenshaw ever answer any of the concerns that people had about the fact that was being pushed?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I have not heard, or I live in Texas, obviously, but I've never seen or heard of Dan Crenshaw showing up to anything anywhere. Dan Crenshaw is just this man is a globalist, number one. And he is a globalist with a capital G, and he has been bought, and he is bought out.
Okay, those are pretty harsh things to say. Like, tell us a little bit more about it. Your friend Dustin, who's in the comments, he says, well, it changes the standard. What bar's out there? He says, I feel like Dan Crenshaw is just another McCain. Can you give us some of the specifics as to why you think he's a globalist?
Well, let's see. They had a convention that was called Global. I forget the title of it, the whole convention, but it was a bunch of globalists, and it was Mark Zuckerberg was showing up. One of the Rothschilds was speaking, and Tulsi Gabbard, and then Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw has voted against. He's for red flag laws, which would basically take our gun rights away. He's voted. That is the name of it. World Economic Forum. That's the name of that event, the World Economic Forum that he was speaking at. And he also is he's against preserving statues. So the statues that get tore down by BLM, he's all for them being taken down. He supports that. He doesn't take any stance on pro-family issues, and he basically wants to avoid the question at all costs. And so, yeah, Dan Crenshaw is not a true Republican. He's not a true Christian. And this man is against us 100%. And so, and everybody needs to know it. Everybody needs to be warned. And whenever it comes time to vote him out, get rid of Dan Crenshaw and elect Tracy.
I would say people didn't know who Dan Crenshaw was when they voted for him. I mean, he was a big deal here locally. I live in his district. He has the eye patch and everyone respects his service. And so I think that really went a long way in getting him elected in this really conservative area. But we just didn't know who he was. And if you're not really watching pro-family and really paying attention, he looks like a good choice, but he's been weak on like the red flag, and he really looks like he leans libertarian, which is a problem because libertarians can be so socially liberal, and they really cannot see the error in that. They cannot see that our party is nothing. It is gone without the pro-family planks, and the party abandoning basically by not really pushing pro-family bills and really good pro-family economic policy as well, not standing up against the gay marriage edict that came from SCOTUS. That hurts our party, because if no party is actually carrying that out, the evangelicals, the Christians, are going to leave the party. They're going to feel disenfranchised and wonder why even vote at all. So these can't just be planks. These have to be things that we actively get done in the state houses and in the Congress. Because if we're not, we aren't doing the things that the left is doing. And they are slowly not just eroding our culture, but eroding our freedoms. And if you want to know where the crazy train stops, I've seen it. I saw it, many years ago when I was divorcing my first husband. The crazy train stops when you no longer have free speech, when you no longer get to make the decisions about your children, because a court is going to say that you're transphobic, you're a Christian. How can you co-parent with someone who is transgender? Or how can you raise your kid that identifies as trans? And we're starting to see that happen now. And I've been warning about it for over 10 years. And that's where it's, those little encroachments on personal liberties that are happening to individuals like they've happened to me. That's going to happen to the whole of society. That's why I fight so hard. I wish I had thousands of me. I wish I had more energy and didn't require sleep. But that's where the train stops.
Well, we all have a mutual friend, Jeff Younger, who, his ex-wife is determined to turn his 8-year-old son into a boy, and he's been fighting in divorce court and family court in Dallas, Texas. So the thing about this is, these socially conservative issues, I believe at this point in 2020, are issues that are now similar to the COVID lockdown, where people can't ignore it anymore because it is coming home to people. It really is affecting people in their families, in their homes, at their jobs. There's a lot of people who have lost their jobs because some gay or trans activist files a complaint with their employer, where they've been kicked off of these internet sources. And so I guess I would pose this to all of you, and I'm going to leave all of your mics on because if my stream gets knocked out, I think somebody is blocking the signals. I don't know. It's weird how all that goes. But what do we do with the Trump movement now? I think all of us were pretty much on board with Trump. I can't speak for all of you. I was completely willing to go to the wire to fight against the election fraud, because I see that as a massive constitutional issue. If we don't have election integrity, nothing matters. But now we're left with this smorgasbord of options. Some people tell us, well, you've got to really fight to make sure that the GOP doesn't lose the Senate. And I'm one of those people, and I know this is very unpopular to hear among Republicans. I don't care if the two people win their seats in Georgia. I don't have any illusions that the Republicans in the Senate maybe they'll slow things down a little bit. I don't care about Supreme Court appointments. One thing that people didn't realize in the last 2 weeks, the Supreme Court, even with all of these supposed conservatives on it, they just ruled that Indiana cannot mandate that birth certificates have the name of the biological mother and father on them, that you can issue that gay couples can sue to acquire children, and through whatever means, even if it's basically buying children, and that they can have the right to put on that birth certificate just the two parents who acquired the child, and that child will never know who their mother or who their father was. That was a week and a half ago with a 6-3 supposed majority among conservatives. I don't really believe that there's anything left to fight for in terms of the Republican Party. But I want to hear what you guys think, because I'm a Debbie Downer on that, and you guys may have a different vision of it. But what do we do with this? I mean, Trump, I love so much of what he's done, but he made unforced errors. This is my frustration with him. He did not need to bring on this poison of Charlie Kirk and Betsy DeVos into his little gang, and now we're stuck with it.
And do not forget Rick Grinnell. They advertised him as the first openly gay cabinet member, and this guy admitted in his first interview it is wrong and it's horrific that other countries criminalize homosexuality, and I push back on it and go, you look at what Paul Johnson wrote when he was a youth activist in the United Kingdom. First, it was decriminalized, and now 40 years later, 60 years later, we have drag queens forcing their way into libraries. We have transgenderism forced on our kids. We have this agenda that where we were told at the outset that we just want to be as consenting adults to enjoy each other in private. It's now shoved in our faces 24/7, and you pay a price if you don't play along. It was just odious to me that this happened, and that it continued to be an issue. Donald Trump did a lot of good policy-wise, but the rhetoric should have never been mentioned in the first place. And Rick Grinnell,
I think that he got surrounded by
advanced into a cabinet position, in my view, because it was all about flaunting his gayness and justifying his perversion.
Right. Now, listen, I am. If it were a case where there was somebody like Rick Grinnell, who really was the best person for the job, and he wasn't going to make homosexuality a big part of his life 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said, look, I'm not going to make an issue out of it. But the problem is that I just never see examples of these people not forcing their sexual personal life onto the policy. It was the same thing with the Houston mayor. Remember, it was like, okay, you did something hugely radical. You became the mayor of one of the largest cities in Texas. You're a lesbian with 4 adopted kids. But then she had to make this part of the urban policy of Houston, which was irrelevant. And Tracy can back me up on this because she's from Houston. Houston did not need that law about transgender bathrooms. It was irrelevant. And she destroyed her political career based on that. I mean, the thing about that is I don't understand why we can't find gay and lesbian people, if they really, really want to go into political office, okay, who can just not make that part of their policy and not try to force conservatives to have to deal with this in the laws that they endorse and what they impose on us. But that seems to go on and on and on. And I think that what I have seen is Trump surrounded himself with all of these religious liberty people. And I think the whole religious liberty mantra has been a smokescreen. Okay, so what do they do? Obviously, they're going to go to the bat to fight the COVID restrictions so that the church can meet. Why? Because these are big, powerful mega churches, and they want to continue to collect tithes. And so whatever, Trump appointed all these people from the Federalist Society to the courts. They love corporations. They love people who are in executive positions. They love rich people. So they're going to go and they're going to immediately side to make sure that the churches can stay open and the tithes can flow. They're not going to help us when it comes to gay adoption. They're not going to protect a child's right to have a mother and a father. They're not going to protect us about the transgender transitioning. They're not going to defend a reparative therapy. So what are they defending? And I guess I'd love to hear from Kevin and Tracy. What is our future in the Republican Party? Do we have a future with them?
Well, I will say, as someone who works for the Republican Party, that we have done this to ourselves. We have. Because in 1953, the book The Naked Communist was written. In 1963, The Naked Communist was read into Congress. The Naked Communist basically lays out the communist planks of America and how they're going to overthrow America and turn America into a communist country. And one of the planks right here, it says, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. And this list goes on and on and on. And there are, let's see, 45 planks in this whole communist agenda. So in 1963, they warned us, and no one did anything about it. Instead, what everybody has done is, as Republicans, has said, well, we have to be politically correct and we cannot offend anyone. You can't say that. That might hurt someone's feelings.
Well, and William F. Buckley, the founder of the National Review, he demonized everyone who was in the John Birch Society, and he said that they were all, tinfoil hat conspiracists and everything. And this was like right after John F. Kennedy got assassinated and the Warren Report came out, and everyone kind of knew that the Warren Report was hiding lots of information. So conspiracy theories were called for at that moment. We were like, we don't know what's going on, and our government is lying to us. But in the middle of all that, William F. Buckley told everyone to back down, and he purged all the anti-communist people out of the conservative movement. That's how we got the National Review. That's how we got those people.
And it's no longer a conspiracy theory whenever it's proven to be true. And so just like a lot of people don't like Alex Jones because they say that Alex Jones is a conspiracy theorist. Well, a lot of Alex Jones conspiracy theories they've become true. So they're not conspiracy theories. And so therefore, now back in the 80s, you could see that this was coming and it was starting. I mean, even in the 70s, even in the 60s, I would say, during the hippie revolution and all about peace, love, and have sex with whoever you want to. So it's not like we did not have signs to foretell the future and no one did anything about it. Yeah. Instead, it was a bunch of people being politically correct. Now, here we are in 2020, and even when I left the gay community 6 years ago, it was night and day compared to what it is now. You would never in a million years see a drag queen running around down the street with their butt hanging out. Like, really? You had to wear pasties or something, or you were getting arrested for nude conduct or at least ticketed. Now it's like anything goes. And so we've lost our morals. And this is part of the communist agenda. And the communists are all Luciferians. So it's really a part of these satanic, demonic.
Okay, but are you, I guess this is what I would pose to both you and Tracy. What do we do with the Charlie Kirk phenomenon from here on in?
Is how this has happened within the MAGA movement.
Yeah.
All these conservatives, they wanted to virtual signal. They wanted to be like, we don't hate gay people. Look, here's a gay person on a stage. Mm-hmm. And there's another gay person on a stage. We don't. And then we have Ricky Rebel, who's the biggest hypocrite. He has a shirt that he sells that says drag queen culture is not for kids. But then he goes around dressing up in drag with his butt cheeks hanging out in the streets. Do you think the kids are not in the streets? Yeah, they are. Mm-hmm. So you're a hypocrite, dude. And so we have all of these hypocrites going and doing this stuff. And why? Why are we doing it? Because they've been indoctrinated by the left to infiltrate the Republican Party. Now, I'm not saying that these people are purposely infiltrating. I'm saying is what they are doing is they are grifting. If they can they would be an open Satanist if they would pay them enough. So because that they can make money off of this MAGA movement, and the MAGA movement wants these gay people in the MAGA movement. So then they throw on a dress and say, look how gay I am, and get on a stage and get paid money to do that. Now, if we were true conservatives, what we would be platforming is people like me and you, Bobby, who have been homosexual, transsexual drag queens, to get on stages at a national level and say, look, this is what I was, but this is what I am now. And you don't have to live in that perversion. You can come out of it. You can change. Change is possible. You don't have to live in that perversion, but that is not cool. That's not hip culturally. So we don't do that.
I'm left with a really hard choice because, so for instance, I'll give you an example, and then I do want to give Tracy a chance to talk about what the future is for us and the Republican Party. On the campus of Liberty University, there's a thing called the Falkirk Center, which was co-founded by Jerry Falwell Jr., who has now been removed from Liberty University's presidency over a sex scandal, and Charlie Kirk. And they started this institute that was going to bring together all these Christian conservatives, people like Ryan Helfenbein, Eric Metaxas is on the board, and also Jenna Ellis, who was the senior legal advisor to President Trump. So this is a very influential group of people. There's a movement on the campus of Liberty University to kick that institute off because a lot of the students are citing the things that we're complaining about, but they're using it really as a pretext because they're liberal and they don't like Trump and they want to get that center off the campus. And I'm left with a dilemma. I can either not say anything about it, just stay quiet about it, which is fine. I have lots of other things to write about. I can stand up for the Falkirk Center and I can say, no, they're doing great work. Or I can join the chorus of protests and say, look, I mean, Charlie Kirk says that he wants to be a big voice in the Christian world, and yet he's continuing to have these events where there's rainbow flags blinding everybody, and Ricky Rebel is singing, and there's all of this lewd anti-Christian behavior. I don't know which of the three that I should do. Sometimes I make an argument for each of the three in my mind. What would you do, Tracy, going forward when we're presented with things like this? Because I don't want our socially conservative position to be used by people who just want to get Trump out and people who are going to be supporting abortion and supporting everything that we don't want. But on the other hand, I don't want to defend Charlie Kirk and then be like Trump, tied to this, really losing proposition of a movement. What would you do going forward?
Well, I have that mass resistance spirit, so I would speak out against this. And I would, we have to be more articulate and about these things, and and really perfect our argument. And one thing that I don't hear being said, Charlie Kirk got where he is by pushing free speech, something we can all agree with. However, you no longer get to talk about free speech when you shut people down who oppose, the homosexuals being pushed on us and homosexuality being normalized. And you no longer get to talk about free speech and be, someone who's up there on a platform holding, saying you advance it, when there's some things that you just refuse to talk about because we got here because of political correctness. And to me, he is pushing a form of that. He is advancing a form of political correctness because he remains silent on these issues. And freedom, there's no freedom, and you and Kevin know it, in homosexuality. Okay, so to be advancing that, he's not even advancing freedom either. So, and for us as activists in the, working in the conservative movement, our job doesn't change, right? It doesn't change. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. It does not matter, who's in Congress, in the Senate or the House. Because for us, we've been fighting the same movement of cultural Marxism for a long time. Like Kevin brought up about the book that he spoke of. Well, there was the whole plan and after the ball on how they were going to advance homosexuality and all of that. And the same plan's been carried out with transgenderism. And, that's what we have to have our plan, because no one is advancing. We have to be advancing, the argument for conservatism. Why are so many homosexuals saying that they agree with Republicans? Well, because conservatism actually benefits them too. But we do not need to change our platform, and we do not abandon the family, which is the foundation of society, and we do not abandon God. from whom our freedom comes. Because you see what happens when the Congress or the court is allowed to hold freedom in their hands and say what rights we can have. And look at our mayors and our governors who have taken on that mantle of saying what rights we have right now. So we need to be advancing the conservatism, and that's really where our fight is. And why are family values so important? What is a family? What is a woman? You know, we have to actually have the argument with people now about what a woman is. You know, we're not.
Well, are you not just a birthing creature? Isn't that the most recent?
Some of us don't have babies, right? But, you know, a woman has the two X chromosomes, a man has XY, and we need to bring it back to the basics on that. And, you know, you spoke about the birth certificates, and that's unfortunate that we are going in a direction, further and further in a direction that I've warned about for years, where medical records and historical records are not even accurate. And, you know, what's the point of having records if they're not accurate? We have to hold the media, the government, you know, accountable. And, you know, the left and the activists, the trans activists, they have guides, media guides. We need media guides. We need to be holding these media accountable every time that they come up and don't refer to females as females and refer to men as women. They need to be held accountable. We need to tell them how we, you know, for myself speaking as a woman, or, you know, Kevin as a man, how do you want to be spoken about? And why does it make sense to talk about the truth?
Well, and I think, and I know that Arthur has some things to add about this, about the ways to deal with a lot of this corruption. One of the things that's going to come out of 2020 is there is going to be a totally different landscape in terms of the media. And I want to make sure that we're not cut out of this alternative media that results from the Trump election scandal and all this stuff going on. I want to make sure that they just don't reproduce the exact same power structure in all of these other new right-wing media sites that are coming along. I don't have a lot of hope that Newsmax or OANN are going to deal with these issues anytime soon. But I'm talking about the big league politics, the Red Elephant, you know, all of those other websites that are booming now, National File, et cetera. I want to make sure that our voices are not kept out of there. That's important. And I do think that somebody like Tracy, we should fight to make sure that you get the proper credit for the work that you did, so that we don't have these grifters who make all this money. I remember on the gay parenting issue, there were tons of people who they did so much fundraising based on their slogan, every child deserves a mom and a dad. But when it came right down to it, then they abandoned the fight, and then they got rid of all of us who had, you know, contributed to that fight. And instead they decided that the next thing to focus on was Christian cake bakers being able to not bake a cake, you know, for a wedding, which was this tiny narrow issue that, you know, didn't affect that many people and wasn't going to advance our goals. Starting with you, Arthur, I know you have a comment that you want to make, and I want to go around for one last round robin, and then we'll call it quits. What do you have to say about the courts and corruption? And then what should we do going forward? What do you see for us after Trump?
So, yeah, I think as a country, as we see more people defying the lockdowns, and we see sheriffs, for example, defying unconstitutional executive orders from governors, we have to start defying the courts, even the Supreme Court, when they want to redefine marriage or deconstruct the difference male and female. We saw that with the Bostock decision. It's time for us to recognize that we need to engage in some mass resistance, clear civil disobedience. I think especially what needs to start happening is we need to be confronting the grifters, the corporate class that we see with MAGA, with the Conservative Inc., MAGA Inc., and all the rest. And I think that's why I do support when individuals call out these so-called influencers, and we need to start doing more of it. I know that I'm starting to reach out to conservative groups and Republican groups demanding that we discuss this issue and debate it. And they're all scared, which shows to me how much more important it is that we have to debate and discuss this issue of LGBT perversion, infiltrating, and poisoning the conservative movement.
All right. And before we sign off for the night, I want each of you also to give the website where you can be found, or your contact info if people want to contact you.
Just really quick, mine, massresistance.org. My email address, arthur@massresistance.org. And my phone number, I'm going to give a cell number, 781-474-3005.
No, don't stop.
474-3005.
Stop. All right. Okay. All right. He did. I didn't make him do it. All right. So, okay, there you go. Okay. Let's go now to Kevin. What do you say for the future? And also, I'd love it if you could give your contact information out.
Well, we just have a coup happening. So please join us in DC on January the 5th at 5:00. We are having a cancel the coup protest. You can hashtag cancel the coup. Also,
you're going to be there?
Huh?
You're going to be there.
Yeah. Yes. And you messed me up. You interrupted me. You can go to the website, cancelthecoup.us, to find out more information. We have confirmed that we are going to have Pastor Greg Locke speaking, and we'll have many other wonderful speakers. So make sure you join us December the 5th at 5:00, possibly at the CNN headquarters, but we might change the location. You can reach me by Kevin Witt on Facebook. My Twitter got taken down by the communists, so I no longer have Twitter.
But it's Kevin, and then your last name is W as in whiskey, H as in hotel, I as in India, TT as in tango, right?
Yes, and I have Kevin the Patriot on Parler. Kevin the Patriot on Parler. So yeah.
All right, great. Tracy, what do you say for the last part, and then tell us how to reach you?
Well, Kevin and I are going to begin protesting the gender clinics in Texas. So keep your eye out for announcements on that. The best place to follow me after January 1st will be on Parler. And my handle there is at Mad Mama Bear, because I'm leaving the other platforms. Either they're going to kick me off or I'm leaving. So I'm just tired of the censorship. It goes nowhere. But I also have a Facebook for maybe a week or two. It's at Tracy Shannon and also at Mad Mama Bear.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I am, you can reach me at R Lopez Mission, that on Twitter. That's my handle. And also I'm on Parler with the same name, R Lopez Mission. And I am regularly doing these broadcasts for the Big Brown Gadfly at Gatekeepers Online. That website is gatekeepersonline.com. And also I do want to plug, somebody was talking about selling books. I am also going to shamelessly plug this book. Greg Locke is actually a contributing author to it along with me. And I hope to be able to continue to support all you guys. Thank you so much for joining. And let's see what the future brings. All right. Oh, wait, Kevin has something to add.
And I have a book coming soon.
Oh, that's
God
true.
Save the Queen. Be on the lookout.
All right. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. All right. Thank you so much.